All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith Shovlin, a senior binding technician here at the Library of Congress. Joining me is my coworker, Ron Lisha Gordon Falls. So this year, can everyone hear me? Anyone? All right, good. So this year, 2025, is the 125th anniversary of the opening of the original binding office at the library. Now, the preservation at the library, as stated here in the 1950 Librarian's Annual Report, started with the oldest and most persistent, the binding program. When the library first got its own building in 1897, the librarian at the time pushed for having its own on-site bindery so that items could be repaired and preserved without the risk of them being damaged in travel. So we had letters to the architect, to the United States Senate, and then an article in Atlantic Monthly calling for a book bindery to be built on site. Finally, in December 1900, that bindery opened. Working in partnership with the government printing office, bindery was opened on site in what's today's Jefferson building. There was about 40 staff members from the printing office with the machinery supplied by them, and a couple staff members from the library overseeing their work. They processed about 30,000 books a year starting out. And over time, as more collections grew, more items needed to be bound, they both expanded space, but also then expanded the use of technology. Different preservation testing was done, new equipment was created, repair shops were opened so that individual items that were damaged could be fixed. And then in time, we outgrew the space in the Jefferson. They kicked us into what is now the Adams building. We ran out of space there about 1975. They kicked us to Navy Yard. We ran out of space there. Well, that was only a temporary stop. Then they kicked us to the Madison building, which has been our home since 1980. Now, most of the binding today is done by a commercial bindery off-site, but still we averaged 1,500 books per week being sent for binding. And talking about some of the interesting things that have come through the binding office over the years, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Ron Lisha with the Declaration of Independence.
By 1820, the original Declaration of Independence had already begun to fade from frequent handling and poor storage conditions. The Declaration comes to the Library of Congress to safeguard the text for future generations. Congress commissioned William J. Stone, a master engraver in Washington, to create a permanent record. Over the course of 3 strenuous years, Stone engraved the Declaration line by line onto a copper plate, so precise it captured every detail of the original. Even the original manuscript of the Declaration of Independence was entrusted to the branch bindery for some preservative touches before it was reverently placed in the beautiful marble shrine of the library, which has become a mecca for all Americans. In 1823, 200 parchment copies were printed, and over the time, the Library of Congress acquired several of these stone copies through donations and purchases. Once in the library's care, preservation became essential. Parchment, made from treated animal skin, is highly sensitive to fluctuations in the light, heat, and moisture. Conservators recognized that without intervention, the documents would crack, fade, or even chemically deteriorate from the iron gall ink. To prevent this, staff developed preservation practices that became models for modern conservation. The stone copies were secured in airtight encasements of archival glass, acrylic, designed to block out the dust pollutants inside the environment, was carefully stabilized. Climate control systems maintain steady temperature and humidity. UV light filtering glass and low intensity lighting immense mite damage. Acid-free supports and buffering materials cushioned the parchment and prevented chemical reactions. In more recent decades, high-resolution digital scans allowed the documents to be studied and shared without subjecting the fragile originals to handling. This work was carried out by the library's Rare Book Division, which curators, paper conservatives, and preservation librarians collaborated throughout the 20th century. They combined traditional methods such as hand cleaning and mending with Japanese tissue, scientific analysis. Under magnification, conservators inspected tiny cracks in the ink. Through fiber analysis, they studied parchment's microscopic structure. And with chemical testing, they verified the storage materials would not damage the text. These processes often take weeks for a single stage because, as one conservator explained, we only got one chance with history's paper. The most dramatic chapter in their preservation story became during World War II after Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The nation feared air raids on Washington, D.C. To ensure survival of its most precious documents, including the Declaration, the Constitution, the Gettysburg Address. The Librarian of Congress, Archibald McKeish, oversaw their emergency evacuation. The library's preservation staff worked with the U.S. Army and the Secret Service to design protective packaging. Each document was placed in a custom-built airtight cases, lined with metal cushioned inside with acid-free cellulose, wadding and felt, and then sealed into heavy wooden crates. On December 26, 1941, under heavy military guard, the crates were transferred into a specifically secured Pulliam train, which traveled under the constant watch to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where they remained locked in the gold vaults during the duration of war. While transferring these precious handling documents saved them from possibility airtight raids, the wear and tear of travel and transport handling damaged the Declaration of Independence and conservation intervention, which was required. In 1952, after years of fighting were over, was Grand Parade ceremony to transfer the Declaration of Independence National Archives, which where it resides today. You can even watch it on YouTube. In 1975, the nation celebrated our bicentennial, and once where Preservation Office was called on to prepare documents from our country's founding for exhibition. Our special interests were preparations made for the display of 3 focal documents in the LC exhibition: Jefferson's rough draft of the Declaration of Independence, Olive Branch Petition, and the Treaty Alliance with France. Special cases were designed for this purpose, and the Preservation Office spent considerable time in installation and testing in the individual airtight fit levels. Was an important footstep in making rare, unusual documents available to public through exhibits. And finally, where they're housed now. The stone copies at the Library of Congress are kept in the Jefferson's building in Washington, D.C., in rare book and special collections vaults. Meanwhile, the original signed declaration is on permanent display just down the street at the National Archives Rotunda for Charters of Freedom. Reflecting on the responsibility, McKeish wrote, "The preservation of a nation's document is the preservation of its spirit." His words captured why such extraordinary measures, scientific manual, and even military were justified.
Next up, we have the Lincoln Papers. In our manuscript division, we have the personal papers of various presidents of the United States. They have since been digitized, so they are available online. But originally, before that was an option, other ways were done preserved. In the case of the Lincoln Papers, they were donated by Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's oldest son, in 1919, under the provision that they not be released to the public until 21 years after he passed. So in a grand event at midnight in 1947, and noted historians, press, and other experts came to the Library of Congress for the first view of Lincoln's personal papers. But it was the library binding office that got to handle it and see them firsthand for the months before, as they bound all of the works and did it all on time, on schedule for this grand event. This was well noted in both the Washington Post and the International Bookbinder Journal of the excellent work of the bookbinding staff to preserve these items, and so that they were available for historians to do research into Lincoln's personal life. Here, in this picture here, you see noted historian Carl Sandburg in the bow tie looking over the index to the papers that was created by binding staff. Now, along with the works that were handed over by Robert Todd Lincoln, there was an additional box of works of items that was donated after Robert Todd Lincoln's death by his wife. Unfortunately, those items were misplaced, but they were misplaced in the private safe in the librarian's office. The problem became we forgot the combination. So in 1975, when Daniel Borstein took over as the new Librarian of Congress, he made sure certain things occurred so that we could open the safe, which, yes, included someone coming up from Lorton Reformatory to be able to crack it. But inside, they found one thing, that box given by Robert Todd Lincoln's wife, and that was, in that box, the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets on the night of his assassination. Those items have now been preserved and are now on display in the Treasures Gallery at the Jefferson Building.
The library's preservation of the Magna Carta is a remarkable story of careful conservation, the use of scientific tools, and the respect for honesty and the historical record. In 1939, the Lincoln Cathedral copy of the Magna Carta arrived at the Library of Congress, brought to the United States to be exhibited at the New York World's Fair. But with the outbreak of World War II, British leaders decided it was too dangerous to send the document back across the Atlantic. Librarian of Congress, Archibald McKeish, together with Werner Kopp, keeper of the collections, coordinated its secure transfer to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where America's gold was stored. It was sealed inside metal containers placed in oak boxes packed with fire, water-resistant materials. It remained in those vaults throughout the war, protected from both enemy attacks and natural damage. Finally, on October 1st, 1944, it returned to public display at the Library of Congress, safe but in need of careful preservation. Once the war ended, preservation became the library's top priority. The Magna Carta, created in 1215, is written on parchment made from animal skin, a material extremely vulnerable to changes in temperature and humidity. If the air is too damp, the parchment swells or buckles. Too dry, and it cracks. The ink was so fading and in some places difficult to read. One of the most delicate features is the Great Seal of King John, still attached by original vellum strips. The seal is made of wax, making it highly sensitive to touch, vibration, and subtle shifts in the air. The library's conservators made an intentional decision. They would not disturb or attempt to restore the seal. Any interference could cause it to crumble. Instead, they stabilized it in place. Recognizing that the seal is not just decoration, it authenticates the Magna Carta as a legal instrument of the English crown. By the late 1940s, flattening and mounting were carried out to support the parchment. In 1947, the GOP wrote, early in the year, section was commissioned to make a special matte background for a copy of the Magna Carta, sent to the Library of Congress by the trustees of the British Museum for a special exhibit here. Since no piece of leather was big enough for the purpose, it was necessary to cut up several strips and join the edges. The work was also required difficult and exacting hand tool operations in which 27 distinct tools had to be used and made. Conservatives then began systematic examination. Under magnifying tools, ultraviolet lamps, they identified hairline cracks, fading text, and even old repairs invisible to the naked eye. Detailed photographs documented those conditions provided by a baseline for future preservation items. The Magna Carta was gently cleaned using soft, natural hair brushes and conservation-grade erasers to carefully remove surface dirt. Unlike earlier eras of restoration, where damaged parts might be redrawn or replaced, the library's philosophy was conservation, protecting what survives without altering its authenticity. The library re-examined the Magna Carta in the 1970s and in the early 2000s, photographing the parchment and updating its housing. In the decades between treatments, conservation practices evolved. Conservators learned from old treatment practices, careful observation, and increasingly used advancements in scientific instruments. We also learned from colleagues at other institutions. For example, in 2011, the National Archives conducted an intensive year-long treatment of its Magna Carta. UV photography, removal of old, repairs, humidification, flattering, and sealing a high-tech argon-filled case. The Library of Congress adapted similar features, controlled environments, low UV displays, lightings, pollutant filtrations, and microclimate cases to safeguard both the parchment and the seal. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution: no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, is a direct descendant of the Magna Carta's guarantee of proceedings according to the law of the land. Today, the Magna Carta is proudly displayed in the David M. Rubenstein Gallery of the National Archives. It rests in a custom engineered case, airtight built laminated glass, equipped with systems that regulate temperature, humidity, and filtered air. The lighting is dim, UV filtered, bright enough for visitors to view, but gentle enough to protect the ink. Most importantly, this king's seal remains undisturbed within its microclimate, shielded from vibration, light, and changes of air that could harm it. This achievement represents the library conservation philosophy of integrity and restraint, and perfectly showcases the work of many conservators, preservation scientists, engineers, and exhibitions of specialists who were over the 8 decades have survived the survival of 800-year-old parchment. So, the Magna Carta story at the Library of Congress is not only about safekeeping, but about science, precision, and respect. Thanks to decades of careful work, we can stand before it today, confident it will endure for generations to come.
Preservation at the library today is done by the Preservation Directorate, which is made up of the Preservation Services Division, which Ronlisha and I work in, the Conservation Division that takes care of large and small items, Preservation Research and Testing that does constant testing of materials and creating of new techniques to be able to analyze the items in our collection or on loan, and Collections Management Division, the people who actually put the books on the shelves and keep the care of them there. Looking at the numbers for that, and first of all, after you're done here, please stop by and say hi to my friends at Preservation right over here at the table under the Adams banner. They'll be happy to talk to you about the wonderful work they're doing for the Library of Congress. In fiscal year 2024, over 7,000 volumes were treated. 93,000 volumes were bound, so that's coming through our office. 26,000 paper-based items treated, and almost 15,000 items deacidified. 12,000 volumes were rehoused in special casing for better storage. It's 740 photographs and over 10,000 discs, films, magnetic tape. 707,000 paper-based pages have been converted to microfilm last year. 5.8 million paper-based items converted to digital format. 25,000 audio files to digital format, and it's also almost 25,000 video files. Our physical additions just last year, 294,000 new print books to the collection, 167,000 other print items, over 2 million manuscripts added to our collection, and 22,000 maps, and almost 210,000 photographs. Our collections continue to grow, and we continue to be there to care for them. Assessment of the collections include over 350,000 items that were assessed last year, 393 volumes, 23,000 pieces relabeled, 22 photographic items surveyed. It's a constant, diligent care to keep these items available for the years to come.
5 years ago, the library binding section was renamed the Processing and Preparation section, foreseeing a future beyond binding books. It is hard to imagine that future when books arrive through our doors, old and new. We process and prepare what are giving, but not privy to what's on the desk of others or what has been written by authors on distant shores. We'll be here and we'll be ready. Thank you. Before you go, we just want to say that we're celebrating 125 years, so we do have commemorative stickers, and we also have buckram that we have used once before for books. So if you are able to get one, we are welcome, and we would love to give it to you. And also, if you have any questions, go ahead.
All right. Any questions? Raise your hand. We're happy to answer. Anyone? Oh, all right.
We get a microphone. No, it's her.
Oh, all right.
Hi, you guys are bringing in a lot of new stuff. Is there ever a danger that you're going to run out of space and have to like relocate again?
Oh, we ran out of space years ago. We built now 7 warehouses at Fort Meade in Maryland for storage of items. We ran out of space in our 3 buildings on Capitol Hill within a decade of building our 3rd building on Capitol Hill. It is a constant struggle for space. About a third of our arrivals now are digital items, which obviously take up a lot less physical space, but still the physical items are continuing to need the additional space to go through. So, right? Anyone else? Oh. Yes.
Apologies, I missed the beginning, so you might have already covered this, but to what extent are you as staff having to learn new techniques to deal with new materials coming in, whether it's having to switch from paper to digital or finding out new technologies for paper preservation?
It is a constant struggle, not just because of the new items coming in that may need different care, but also the items that we use growing out of use. Like the materials we use for binding, we've gone through cycles where it's been no longer available, especially during the pandemic it was an issue. So we are constantly testing and studying and trying to figure out new ways to preserve these items. Preservation research and testing is constantly has something new that their chemists and analysts are looking over. So it is forever constant and going.
God. What's the most difficult thing that you've had to preserve?
The most important thing I've had to preserve? Well, early on in my days at binding, we had Japanese whale bones, where Japanese poetry had been inscribed in the bone. That is not something you can bind. But the Conservation Division and Collections Care section worked to create a housing of foam and plastic that were able to hold them so that they're not only well kept but also visible, so that what is the point of preserving it if we're going to hide it away? So, right.
How were they able to keep the Magna Carta in the United States after World War II when it was. I'm surprised that it wasn't sent back to where it was originally signed in England, where it was.
Yeah, there actually, if you might notice, well, let's just talk, there were two copies. The original copy was here until 1944 and then returned. Then we got the Laycock Abbey copy, and that's still here today at the National Archives. Yes. Yeah, and that's at the British Library in London now. But they needed to make sure that it would be safe, and by late 1944, they felt London was safe. All right. What's your favorite thing to work on? See, it's hard to say because on our regular duties, we're sorting items, preparing items for binding, packing and unpacking, and then doing the quality review when they come back. We're all bored and tired of all of those things. So basically, anytime we get to do something special, like say, come and talk to these wonderful people here at the National Book Festival. So the key thing is we try our best to do well at our jobs so that then we can have new opportunities to do things like this. So, Ralisha, what do you think? What's your favorite thing?
About working?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm passionate about what I've done. I'm doing this for years, so pretty much just making sure that the work is done properly. So it's all about the process and doing it with integrity, and we love what we do. We go there every day. We make sure that it's packed safely, that it's typed right. We recheck them. And although we're doing high numbers at a high volume, we're constantly reviewing and checking one another. And that's what I love about it. It's just integrity, making sure that we QC and make sure that all the quality is right. So I really love that. And of course, it's just nothing but history there.
How many people work in your department?
Well, yeah.
When I started 19 years ago, we had 15. We're down to 4 now. And we're still sending out 1,500 items a week and doing 100% quality review of everything that comes back from the bindery.
We have different notations, so we make sure that, of course, this is buckram that we're passing out, but we make sure that the material is correct, or if not, it's sent back. We make sure that the title, everything, the author, everything has integrity about it. So it comes from the system, and then from the system, it goes to making sure that the item is correct before it's sent off to any of our locations.
Hi, thanks for being here. I had kind of a elementary question, which is, I was surprised to hear that the Lincoln papers were bound.
Yes.
Doesn't binding papers together change the material itself? In other words, I would expect if I wanted to see the Lincoln papers, I might leaf through a box of papers. So I'm surprised that they were turned into a book. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like when we get items today, if it's something older than, say, around 70 years, we will not send it for binding because you destroy part of the historical material when it is bound. In the case of the Lincoln papers, at the time in 1947, binding was the best preservation option. And it still is for a lot of the books that we deal with today. If we had a chance to do it over again, would we? Probably, because there wasn't a better option. Microfilming wasn't there yet. But now we digitize everything so that we keep every last pixel of those documents so that they're available for everyone to see. Last question.
Is the Magna Carta the oldest thing in the Library of Congress's collection, or is there something older?
Oh, no, not even close.
What's the oldest thing?
In our African and Middle Eastern collections, we have Sumerian tablets that are over 4,000 years old. Unfortunately, we've lost the chargers and the screen is cracked on one of them. Thank you all.